Welcome back. Today we're gonna watch Population Collapse is Coming. It's by After School. They kind of animate a bunch of people's like TED Talks or their conferences, or like when people make a speech, they kind of just like animate it. Sometimes the people will come in and do it specifically for After School, but a lot of times they just straight up like find something that's relatable to the video that they're making and then animate it and put the person's speech in the background. But also, if you watch After School long enough, you'll start to notice that they reuse some of their art, which is understandable because it's pretty freaking hard to like consistently do this type of stuff that they're doing. And I don't really know how often they release a video, but it's probably pretty labor intensive to do something like this. But I'm doing dailies on my Glaber right now, and we're gonna watch this. This is kind of like I picked this one because, as you guys know, think 2 days ago or last Friday. It's Monday now, so like last Friday, they repealed Roe v. Wade. So there's gonna be, I don't know if this is like talking. It looked like, because it said population collapse. It looked like it was like kind of talking about like what happened in Japan where they weren't making enough children, and the older people got older and there wasn't really as many young people to take on the burden that the old people kind of had to stop doing because they got too old, and their population is collapsing, and it's like going in the negative, like they're getting negative growth rate. I don't know if this is actually talking about that, but it kind of seemed similar. I guess we'll see while we're watching it. So let's watch it. Or it could be, something else, something cataclysmic. But Roe v. Wade being repealed is also pretty you know, cataclysmic for people's rights that they've been feeling for the past 50 years, and now it's just gone. And people that were never born in the before this was enacted now have to like live that life again. It's pretty sad. Oh, can't hear it, right? Um, Headphones. No. Alright, that shit loud as hell.
Currently, we're not, because of just generally low birth rates almost worldwide. Civilization is not headed to have a population that is an order of magnitude greater than where we're currently. We're currently headed towards a population decline, and this is almost everywhere in the world. It basically seems as though as soon as you have like
Alright, so they are talking about population decline right now.
urbanization, and education beyond a certain level and income beyond a certain level, birth rates plummet. And so as countries get wealthier, their birth rates plummet. It's somewhat counterintuitive because people will say like, well, it's too expensive to have a baby. Nope. The wealthier you are, the fewer kids you have. The more educated you are, the fewer kids you have. So it's the inverse. This, by the way, is, I think, the biggest single threat to civilization right now is the...
Yeah, why do you think societally people just make those decisions when they become more affluent? Is it that they just become more selfish, or there's more things for them to do and they have more money to spend on themselves and they say, you know what, I don't want to have a large...
I think the more resources you have and the less time you're thinking about survival, and the more time you're thinking like you're doing a lot of reflection, the more you start to realize that um it might not be such a great idea, because you I feel like you worry more the more time you think, right? You worry, you worry less about eating and making more resources to provide for you, such as having a bigger family in hopes that one of your children makes it so you can like be taken care of in the long run. Like that's the new survival method, right? Like new, but it's the same survival method they were using back in the day. Like they needed more kids to hunt, they needed more kids to farm. Now they need, poor people need more kids to hopefully get them out of a generational poverty and be the first wealthy person in their family and get everyone else, out of the rut. But then once you're actually wealthy, you kind of start overthinking about the circumstances that you're putting these kids in and how busy your life is, and um like, are you going to be a good parent? Like, it's just a lot of overthinking, and people that have more time to think, like, they tend to overthink more, so they tend to weigh the pros and cons, and more than likely they're going to get way more cons than they're going to get pros, because they just haven't experienced being a parent yet, and that's understandable. I'm a father of three, so, and I'm not wealthy by any means. And after having my first child, like, I was well off. I was taken care of by the military, so I didn't really have that many things I needed in life. And my kids were also provided for. It's like the main thing is that people don't have health insurance, and like what happens when their kid gets sick, their kids get hurt, right? So it goes a lot of thinking, but when I had that safety net, it was like easier to do that. But the more I had children, the more it motivated me to better myself, and to, instead of relying on them to get us out of uh, generational poverty, I'm putting it on myself so I can help them, so I can give them a better future. So I mean, it goes both ways. Like, not everyone's gonna think like that, and I understand why people who are more well off wouldn't want to have children, just because they don't know how they can be the same person while trying to raise someone else, right? Like, if this is you right now and you progress this far, and you have to continue doing this, you have to continue operating at 110% for whatever you're doing, how can you insert something so drastic as another human being, right? Right now I have a lot of free time. I'm just like, my kids are watching TV right now. They just had breakfast. After I'm done with this, we're we're probably gonna go to Universal Studios, and we're just gonna do things that we do every summer, like shit that we just do. Like, while I'm not in school, this is what we do. While they're not in school, this is what we do. While they're in school, we do this stuff on the weekend. Like, you build up a routine, but when you have a job and you have commitments and you have to go travel and you have to go do corporate meetings in different countries, and you gotta, work with clientels in different cities, it's understandable why you don't want to, or you don't know how to interrupt that without interrupting it too much to where your life changes so drastically. And and you do have a kid, you kind of have to, deal more with the cons and turn those cons into positives. And that's how I see it anyway. When I, see people doing pros and cons of having a child, and the cons usually outweigh the pros, well, you just have to turn those cons into a positive. You need to somehow spin that to make it good for you. If you're saying that I'm not gonna have enough time for my kids because I gotta work, then you need to spin that to, well, I'm working to give this child a better future, right? Or or maybe I need to work less and manage my time better so I can have rest. But then it goes into like, oh, am I really resting enough to take care of a child? I mean, we you can make a whole video on that, but I understand why it's so hard to have a child and really uproot your life, because that's a big decision. It's a big leap.
Family, I want to, go to Coachella.
Yeah. Well, there is this like weird like mind virusy thing where some people are think like having fewer kids is like better for the environment.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
crazy.
just total nonsense.
Nonsense.
The environment is going to be fine. They're going to be fine even if we doubled the size of the humans. This is, and I know a lot about environmental stuff. So,
Stuff and things.
we can't have civilization just dwindle into nothing. And Japan's a leading indicator here. Like Japan's population declined by 600,000 people
It's
last
always
year.
Japan.
They had the lowest birth rate in history. It's pretty bad.
it has been known, if you read about Japan, that Japan is the culmination and the end product of capitalism. It is overworking your young workers to the point where they feel exhausted and they feel that they don't have enough time to raise a child when they have to do so much as a young adult. They have to do so much as an old adult, as a mid adult. Like they have to just do so much for capitalism, right? Like once they got rid of after World War II, and they got rid of their kind of their need to war, right? Like America and the Allies took their need for war. They just took away all their rights to build an army. So all their factories and all their young assets became workers, and they had a massive economic boom. And during that economic boom, people were living the high life, like they're doing now in the United States. They're partying, they're being rich, they're being young, they're being wealthy, and they didn't want to uproot the what they were doing. And in the later stages of capitalism, someone always has to replace you, someone younger with newer ideas. It's just how it works. If no one replaces you, then you're stagnant. And once those people have been replaced, then people start realizing like, oh, I'm 60 years old, I can't have a child anymore, and now I can't work as hard, and then there's no one to replace them. So then the people that did have children, the poor people, like then their children, be good, climb up that corporate ladder, and there's even less of them, and then the same cycle happens. But no matter what, you're always gonna have poor people, right? You can't have all a bunch of rich people. It just wouldn't make sense as a capitalistic state. It just doesn't make it. It won't work. You can't have only rich people in the capitalistic state. It just doesn't work. You're just you're giving communism and socialism a fancy new name, right? The shit that all these capitalists fear. You're just giving it a cuter name. Um, so so after the workforce of Japan kind of dwindled, and what we're seeing now, they're having the same problems, but it's even more exacerbated now because there's even less people having children than there were before, and there's even less money that they're able to make because their productivity levels are low, and then now they're trying to get people to have more children so they can increase their productivity, have more time to be able to siphon off of their population for Japan itself. And it's a main sticking point for population growth, and to not hinder capitalism in the United States is to for people to have children. But when he talks about people, he's talking about poor people. He's not talking about rich and wealthy people. Like they're asking a question now, like why aren't rich healthy people having more kids? Well, because it's the system that we built, and we have data that shows why people act this way. And don't say the environment. It's because you're overworking them. They don't have time. There's only so much time that a human can possibly have, and having a child goes pretty low to the bottom of the list when you're overworked like this and you're stressed out of your gourd. The more stressed you are, the harder it is to even have kids.
So this one element of it is a lot of people just think that having kids is somehow bad for the environment. I want to be clear, it's not. It's essential for maintaining civilization, that we at least maintain our numbers. We don't necessarily need to grow dramatically, but at least let's not gradually dwindle away until civilization ends with us all in adult diapers and in a whimper. Like, we don't want civilization to end in adult diapers with a whimper. That would
Kind of suck, yeah.
$300 billion.
bleak and sad. No, there's literally, I've heard many times,
Have some
how
programs
can
out.
I bring a child into this terrible world? I'm like, have you read history? Because let me tell you, it was way worse back then.
That's such a stupid argument, dude.
Oh, so the data overall is showing us for the
That's like an argument like, oh, well, you don't have to experience Black Plague, so I don't care if you're starving. I don't care if you don't have a home. That's the stupidest shit you ever heard. Like, what? Like, yeah, it was harder in the fucking Crusades to have a child. Like, okay, are we in the Crusades, bitch? Like, we're here. There's still kids starving. Like, sure, we're better off when we have technology, all this shit, but it's technology's not gonna feed a hungry child, is it? You're not gonna give that lady that lost her job at Walmart any money to feed her kids that are now on that are beyond on welfare and they can't even survive on welfare because there's too many people on welfare. Like, are you donating your $250 billion? Come on.
The world as a whole, back in 1960, an average couple had 5 children. That's the whole world.
I'm close.
Now they have a little less than half that, 2.4 children. That doesn't sound too bad. It's still over replacement. But when you dive into specific countries like the US, like Asian countries, you see the situation is a lot worse. And surprisingly, Mark, everybody is declining. All countries are declining. In fact, the countries you think, well, they're not declining, like East African countries, they're actually declining at a sharper rate because they're starting at a higher point, right? So you have this overall decline in fertility. And normally, the shape of the population in terms of age is a pyramid. So very few on top, a lot on the bottom, a lot in the middle, and the middle
We're
supports the top and
inversing
the
that
bottom,
right
right?
now.
But what's happening
Japan has already
now, and you
inversed
can
that.
see that in the pyramid in Asian countries, is that the bottom is shrinking pretty dramatically. There's a bulge in the middle, and the top is growing hugely because people have longer lifespans. So longer lifespans is a great thing. I approve of that, of course. But
Like,
in
it's just
terms
gonna
of
stop because she
support,
disapproves of it.
they're not going to have the money for Social Security. That's already a threat in this country. They're not going to have the money for Medicare. They're not going to have the resources to support this older population in terms of, medical treatment. And you're not going to have the labor force necessary to drive the economy. It's that middle sector that
productivity,
drives the
bro.
economy. And it's going to have huge economic implications. And many economists are looking at that now. It doesn't look good.
Oh, well, I've thought for at least 10 years that the biggest problem in 50 years will be that there's just not enough people.
All right, let's be clear that this problem that they're all talking about is a capitalistic problem. It is not a societal problem. It is not a cultural problem. It's an economic problem. This is all money related, and because all right, let's say we get rid of the need for money, right? And you're looking at a stagnant population of 400 million people in the United States. No one has kids ever again. Eventually the outcome is we all die, right? So the thing they're talking about is that if there's no children, there's not going to be any future farmers. So there's not going to be any food. And if there's no food, everybody dies. This is what they're talking about. Like, if you don't have workers, right? The old problem that we had before when we didn't have as much technology and we had the Dust Bowl and everybody was a fucking farmer, is that if you don't have workers, right now they're all talking about, well, what if we don't have as many Amazon workers? Like, we need to build the robots, right? But they're mainly concerned about if everybody gets old and everybody's siphoning off the state, then where is the productivity and the money coming from? Like, who is going to be in the factory floor? Who is going to be in the farm doing this shit if everybody's old and decrepit? Like, that's what they're wondering. They don't give a shit if you really want to have kids or not, or if, like, the pros and cons of having a child. They're scared that the capitalistic system is going to collapse if poor people don't have children. They were talking about rich people in the beginning. They don't give a fuck about rich people. Rich people aren't the 1% are not the ones producing value for for any state, any country, any continent. Rich people are not the ones producing the value. It's poor people. But people who consider themselves middle class, people who are in the field, like those guys are producing the value, and they're wondering, why are you stopping having children? And it's not like they don't have the answer, because they don't have fucking time. They don't have money for kids. And they're like, well, why do you want why do you want increased wages? Like, because I want to have a family, I want to have a house, I want to have children that I can take care of. You fill those needs. I will bet you every dollar in my pocket, I don't have any pockets right now, that people would have kids. Like, they keep saying like, oh, wealthy people aren't having kids. No, wealthy people have plenty of fucking kids. Elon Musk has 8 kids. However many kids he has. He's a wealthy person. Someone making $100,000 with a $1 million house is not probably not gonna have a child. Even if he makes $100,000, he has $1 million house. His mortgage is probably around $3,000 a month. The fuck are you gonna do with a kid?
I remember hearing you say a few years ago that you thought we'd peak at about 9 billion.
Yeah, we probably won't hit 9. Yeah, and I
Think
knew the
about this.
stats because
Think about how crazy it is to think that we might be living on Earth right now at a time with the most number of humans that are ever going to exist at one time ever.
yeah, that's highly probable. And and the
That
population
blows my mind.
The population collapse in
does that
developed
blow your
countries
mind,
is
though?
precipitous, right? It's like we fall off a cliff. I mean, all the countries in the West are way below replacement. Korea's way below replacement. South Korea, Japan, way below replacement. Yeah.
I think the number
it's
one
not good.
number one on the planet might be Chad. Chad, the country.
In terms of growth,
8 children on average.
yeah, I think Nigeria will have more people in it than China by the end of the century. Yeah, well, and this idea that the planet has too many people on it, there's no sentiment more implicitly genocidal than that statement. So what do you mean too many people? Exactly. And what do you mean the planet? And what do you propose to do about that exactly? Mass abortion, is that your answer? Or should we do something a little more dramatic? Maybe we'll just shame people out of having children. And I've seen people do that, literally. I saw a professor when I was at a TED, I think it was doesn't matter. It was a number of professors talking to a couple hundred students.
Doesn't matter,
And
it's just a story.
one of the professors who was an environmentalist activist type, and he got up on stage and shook his finger to the whole young crowd saying that him and his wife had only decided to have one child. And he told all the young people there if they had a shred of ethical decency that they would severely limit their reproductive potential. And I stood up and said that I thought that was one of the most appalling things I'd ever heard anyone in academia say to young people, which is really saying something, because they say plenty of appalling things. And it was a very uncomfortable moment, and he huffed off the stage. But in a frenzy, talking about how you couldn't talk about such things without being pilloried on ethical grounds. And yeah, that's for sure. You come out as a emissary of the academic establishment. You tell young people that humanity is so corrupt that they should seriously consider not propagating because that violates the deepest of ethical norms. And you think that's a good thing and that that's your right. And it was just beyond comprehension. It's beyond comprehension, but it's associated with like a deeply rooted existential self-hatred. I mean hatred at the level of humanity is like a virus on the planet, that we're a cancerous growth.
Alex Epstein calls this human racism.
Right.
And it's that.
Yeah, well, we're a cancer on the planet, unchecked growth, just like a cancer. It's like, that's us, a cancer. It's okay. We know where your heart is located. Because what's the implications for a doctrine like that? What do you do with the cancer?
Cut it out.
Yeah, that's for sure. Poison it or whatever. There's nothing you don't do to a cancer. So you're going to use a metaphor like that? There's too many people on the planet. You're going to use a metaphor like that? And then you're going to also decide that you're virtuous while you're using it because you're on the side of the planet, whatever the hell that means. So yeah, it's unbelievable. And a huge part of it's rooted in this existential shame.
I hate people like him. Sure, it's a pretty terrible take to like tell people how many children people should have. Like that's their own damn choice. Like they can decide what is good for them, right? But you can't just go around telling people to have more kids if you don't know their circumstance. You're really gonna tell someone in who has a $7 an hour job, who lives in uh you know what, welfare housing or whatever the fuck those are called, and who is struggling to feed themselves, like, hey, have kids because we need productive members of society to build shit for us. Like, how are you solving the crisis of the people of orphanages right now, of people that are starving right now? What are we doing about homeless people? Like, instead of helping out the people that we have right now, we're asking more people to have more kids that we're not taking care of. Like, Jordan Peterson is not gonna fucking feed your kids. Like, he can try to be self-righteous about, oh, that's you're against humans if you tell people not to have kids. Like, maybe he's just telling people to think of their circumstances, because you can act as, discuss it as you want, but are you feeding these people's kids? If the answer is no, then you could probably just shut the fuck up and let them make the decision themselves.
Shame and horror at the condition of being human and the fact that life is rife with suffering and a lot of it's unjustified. And it's a Mephistophelian position. So Mephistopheles was laid out, portrayed in Goethe's Faust. That's the story of a man who sold his soul to the devil for knowledge. It's a story of intellectual pride, and Goethe stands in relationship to German literature in the same manner that Shakespeare stands in relationship to English literature. And Goethe's Mephistopheles says straight out twice in the play, once in the first, there's two books, and once in the first book and once in the second. Goethe has him restate it twice. Existence is such a foul thing because of all its suffering, essentially, that it would be better if it was merely annihilated. And that's the Mephistophelian stance. This whole show should just come to a halt. Look at how corrupt people are. Evil reigns everywhere. It's nothing but will to power. We're destroying the planet with our unchecked ambition, all of it rooted in greed and Machiavellianism and jockeying for position. And we're so contemptible that we should just roll up and die.
I don't know about that.
And we should shame women into not having children. And we should shame men so they never manifest any planet-destroying ambition. And it's unbelievably appalling. It goes all.
He wasn't even telling people, like, in his own story. He wasn't, the professor wasn't telling people to not have kids. He was saying, be smart about it and think about it in your situation. And he says, I had one kid because that's what he can take care of. And the professor is assuming other people are gonna be either as well off or not as well off as him, but not more well off, right? And he was just, from what I can gather here, there's small part of this, a lot of assumptions on my part, was to have one child because that's what was feasible for him. And I'm assuming if more children are feasible for you, you can have more children. So why would you be mad about that? He's not telling you. You want to tell people to have 5 kids because of Chad, where children are being abducted and sold for slave labor? What? Like, what are you fucking saying, dude? What?
The way down to the bottom of things. That's what's tearing our culture apart, this dispute about the nature of existence at the most fundamental level.
My kids make me very hopeful for the future. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people say, oh, I wouldn't want, good people I know, I don't want to bring kids into this world. Like, my age, no kids. Don't do that shit. If you think you're a good person, please have a kid. Put all your good ideas in that kid.
Yeah.
So that the world will be better.
That's what I'm doing. But I'm showing them first. See, I like Dave Chappelle's take on it. Because, as short as his statement was, he was giving people the choice. Like if you think you're able to do it, and you know you thought about it, you're, what is this? You're like you think you're able to do it because you have values that you want to instill in people that will make the world better, then have a child, right? Jordan Peterson is literally just straight up saying, have more than one kid. It from his statement, just have more than one kid. I don't give a fuck where you're at. I don't care what your circumstances. Just have more kids. And when it's stated like that, you can't help but feel that it's more deeply rooted in a capitalistic mindset instead of a humanistic mindset. Like you're not really asking people to better themselves and to better the culture. You're just asking people to have more children. And like no matter what. Like the professor was saying, yes, it's imperative that you should have a child, but have a child when you're ready and your circumstances permit it. And for them, it permitted one. It doesn't mean it's only gonna permit one for you. But I don't know, they just like rub me the wrong way. Because I feel like it negates people's choice, right? He was mad that people that this guy was shaming people that want to have more than that want to have more than one child, and it's appalling, and people should be able to make more than one child, and that's completely true. But the way he's stating it, it seeming like you need to have more than one child, and you don't. It is a personal choice that you need to weigh deeply, and you will never feel ready. And when you finally take your leap, if you even want to take that leap, then you will see yourself grow as you've grown to any other thing that you've done. You probably didn't think that you could, pass high school. You probably didn't think that you could learn how to drive. You probably didn't think that you would get on a plane. Like these are you're probably thinking like, oh, those are so trivial, those are so small. But if you at like looking at that stage of your life and how you were thinking as a 14-year-old, as an 18-year-old having to go to college, as a 21-year-old getting your first job, when you think at it that way and how unknown the future was for you, then it's exactly the same position that you would be in now weighing having a child. You will not know until you have one. And if you've succeeded in everything else to a point where you're contemplating, oh, it might hinder my lifestyle, then you're probably ready and you want to make the change, but you're scared to make the change. And your lifestyle probably could help being slowed down, could help being changed up by that. And I know I'm sounding like, oh, what? That sounds really selfish and self-centered. Well, yeah, because it's about you. This is your choice. The child is not gonna have a job. It's not gonna have money. She's not gonna have things that it'll want or need, and everything that you think your child wants is something that you're giving it. So it is becomes a job. Like everyone, like besides food and sleep and safety, everything else that you're giving a child is something that you're just like either projecting, or something that you think the child wants, or something maybe you didn't have as a child. Um, like like for me, I always like my parents always, because my dad was in the military, so he would like travel, and I would stay with my mom and my brother when he was born, and we would kind of just like wait, and we would always talk about like, oh man, I wish we could like go here, I wish we could go here, I wish we could. We lived in London, so we're in England. We went to London like twice. Like we lived in England for 6 years, and I was like, man, I wish I could go to like some other parts of Europe. Like I thought that would be so cool as a child, right? We had Legoland. Went to Legoland like 4 times. It was awesome. But as I got older, I wish like I went to different things. And now as a father, I take my kids to theme parks because I wanted to go to theme parks more. I take my kids to traveling because I wanted to travel more. I take them to restaurants because I always like felt like I wanted to eat with my parents, and then they'll tell me like, "Oh, I don't want to do that," but they don't know what they don't want to do. They don't know if they want to go to a museum or not until you take them to a museum. They don't know if they want to go to a science center or not until you take them there. My kids, like, they were like, "I fucking hate science. Like, I hate that in class. I don't want to go to a science center." Now they try to go to science center every month. Like, like kids don't know until you take them and expand their knowledge. But with that comes selfishness. This is what I'm trying to get at. Sorry, I'm very long-winded. It comes with selfishness. Your children don't know what they want unless you bring them there, right? So that comes with a lot of selfishness of, okay, I want to take them here, and we'll see if they like going to this restaurant. We'll see if they like going to the movies. We'll see if they like going to this theme park. We'll see if they like going here. And you won't know unless you go and do it. And like you were before, making your own decisions and doing your own things, you kind of still do that, but you're just tagging a child along. And they become a representation of you because they don't really have a solid grasp on their own opinion yet. They might have a little bit of opinions and they'll voice that from time to time, but they can't cultivate a strong opinion of a self, of their inner self, unless you give them a bunch of experiences so they can know what they dislike or like, to start building, you know, their personalities and their wants and needs. And then usually around, you know, like 10, 11, they'll have a very strong grasp of what they want to do, and then that's when every parent's like, "Oh, my kid's being so rebellious. Oh my God, it's the teenage years. My kid's being like, no, your kids just has their own personality now, and they don't just do whatever the fuck you want to do." And that's when it becomes a little harder to be a parent, because you've been selfish your whole life plus, you know, 8 years of their life, and now they're starting to voice their own opinion, and you kind of have to um get a sense for that and figure out like how to move about that and start teaching them not only compassion, but I mean, you should always teach that the whole time, but now it's even more imperative because now you want them to be able to listen to other people, and they can only do that if you listen to them. All right, getting a little tirade here of a rant and a bunch of, you know, things that don't really have anything to do with the fucking video, but pretty good video. Basically what I expected, that they wanted more people to have children. Some of them did come from a humanistic, really, it was just that last Dave Chappelle quote, the more human take on having children. So if you think you want children and you think that it'll be good for you and, you know, the society, and everyone else was kind of just speaking on, well, society, you know, economy. Like look at Japan, look at Asia. They didn't have children. Look at their economy. Like, okay, what about the starving people? Yeah, how do we deal with that? But that's probably a whole other video. So I'll see you guys later. Pretty good video. Enjoyed it.